All right, picture this. 1964,
Oh, okay.
New York City.
Yeah.
You're on the tarmac
Oh,
as
yeah.
the Beatles arrive.
Wow.
That frenzy,
Yeah.
the sheer frenzy of Beatlemania,
Oh, I can imagine.
exploding all around you.
What a moment in music history.
That energy, that cultural earthquake,
Right.
that's where we're starting our deep dive today.
Okay.
Buckle up, because we're tracing how rock and roll revolutionized the 50s and 60s and how its impact is still felt today.
It's amazing to think about how a genre of music
Right.
could have such a lasting effect on our world.
Totally. And to guide us, we've got some really cool sources.
Oh, cool.
Articles on the cultural side of rock,
Mm-hmm.
how it's changed over time,
Okay.
the major players,
Yeah.
and even, get this,
What?
how it's connected to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Wow.
The scope of rock's influence is truly global.
It is.
So get ready for some serious, mind-blowing moments
I'm ready.
as we unpack this whole rock and roll revolution.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so before we hit the 60s and Beatlemania,
Right.
we need to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, let's go back to the roots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because before the 60s, there was already this incredible energy building with rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a sound, it was this cultural fusion,
Yeah.
breaking down the walls between country, blues, gospel,
Oh,
all
wow.
happening in the 50s.
A melting pot of musical styles.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the diverse group of early rock and roll pioneers.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
We're talking Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Little Richard,
Yeah.
Bo Diddley,
Mm-hmm.
Carl Perkins,
Of course.
and of course the king himself, Elvis Presley.
These artists weren't just churning out hits.
Nah.
They were challenging conventions, pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
They had this raw energy that was both rebellious and exciting.
And let's not forget the impact of Little Richard's flamboyant style,
Oh, yeah.
especially in a segregated America.
Absolutely.
Talk about a powerful statement.
It challenged societal norms head on
Yeah.
and paved the way for the counterculture movement that was just around the corner.
So the seeds of change were sown in the 50s,
Right.
but then the 60s hit.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
more than just tie-dye and peace signs.
Right. The 60s were a time of intense social and political change.
Yeah.
You've got the Vietnam War, the rise of LSD,
Mm-hmm.
a potent mix of questioning authority and searching for new experiences.
And music became the voice of this generation.
It did.
Really?
Folk musicians like Bob Dylan,
Okay.
Velvet Underground,
Yeah.
and Simon and Garfunkel tapped into this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
They wove social commentary into their lyrics,
Yeah.
challenged U.S. policies both at home and abroad,
Wow.
giving a voice to a generation that was questioning everything.
And even the concept of patriotism was redefined.
Exactly.
Oh, how sad.
We see this contrast between Richie Havens' powerful improvisation of freedom at Woodstock
Oh, wow.
and The Haunting the Unknown Soldier
Yeah.
by Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Two very different expressions of patriotism, both powerful in their own way.
And then, of course, you have the Beatles,
Oh, yeah.
a complete cultural earthquake.
They absolutely dominated the charts,
Yeah.
holding 6 of the top 7 spots for best-selling albums globally during the 60s.
It wasn't just about popularity, though, right?
No,
Their music seemed to carry this message of freedom and individuality.
precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why some Russian academics believe the Beatles' music played a role in the fall of the Berlin Wall decades later.
Hold on, seriously.
Yeah.
The Beatles helped bring down the Berlin Wall.
It might sound crazy, but that's the argument.
Wow.
Mikhail Safonov,
Okay.
a senior researcher at the Institute of Russian History,
Mm-hmm.
believes that the Beatles helped cultivate a generation in the Soviet Union that valued freedom and individuality,
Okay.
ideas that ultimately contributed to the fall of totalitarianism.
That's mind-blowing.
Right.
It wasn't just the music itself, but the ideas it represented.
Exactly. Their music became a symbol of freedom and individuality, ideas that were at odds with the Soviet ideology.
It's incredible how those ripples spread across continents and through decades.
It really shows the power of music to transcend borders and inspire change.
And it wasn't just limited to music.
Right.
The 60s saw this rebellious energy in every corner of American culture.
You're absolutely right. From Jimi Hendrix burning his guitar on stage,
Oh, wow.
to the satirical film Dr. Strangelove,
Yeah.
to Hunter S. Thompson's revolutionary approach to journalism.
Mm-hmm.
It was a period of massive cultural change.
It really was a generation challenging everything.
And they did it through art, music, literature,
Right.
every form of expression they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
It was a time of incredible creativity and upheaval.
So rock and roll was at the very heart of this revolution.
It was the soundtrack, the driving force
Yeah.
and the symbol of a generation that was demanding change and questioning everything.
So this rebellious spirit, this need to push boundaries.
Right.
Is that what fueled the evolution of rock over the years?
Absolutely. Think
Yep.
about how rock is transformed
Yeah.
from progressive rock and heavy metal
Mm-hmm.
to punk, new wave, and grunge.
Wow.
It's constantly pushing boundaries, experimenting with new sounds,
Yeah.
and challenging the status quo.
And it's always blending with other genres, rock, with jazz, funk, even hip-hop.
That's a defining feature of rock music.
Yeah.
Its adaptability and influence.
Right.
It takes bits from other genres and creates something new and exciting.
Like a musical chameleon,
Yeah.
always changing and evolving.
And that's what keeps it relevant and exciting even today.
Yeah.
Bands like Radiohead, Arctic Monkeys, and Tame Impala are carrying that torch, blending genres and experimenting with sound.
So even though the 60s are long gone,
Right.
the spirit of rock and roll lives on.
It absolutely
It
does.
is amazing.
It continues to inspire both artists and audiences, pushing musical boundaries and challenging us to think differently about the world.
Wow, I never realized how much history and impact is packed into this one genre.
It's truly a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And the best part is, it's not over yet.
Right.
Rock music continues to evolve and inspire, and who knows what the future holds.
Okay, I'm ready to dig deeper.
All right.
Let's talk about how the sound of rock has actually changed over time.
Let's get into the nuts and bolts of how rock has evolved musically.
Okay, let's talk about that evolution.
Sure.
How has the actual sound of rock changed over the years?
One of the most striking things is how rock music has continuously incorporated new technologies and instruments.
Makes sense. Technology has come a long way since the early days of rock and roll.
Think about the huge impact of electric guitars, amplifiers, and recording studios in the 50s and 60s.
Those innovations really shaped the sound of rock as we know it today.
Absolutely. And then in the 70s, we see the rise of synthesizers and other electronic instruments,
Okay.
which opened up a whole new world of sonic possibilities.
Which leads to genres like progressive rock and electronic rock, right?
Exactly. And those genres kept evolving in the 80s and 90s with drum machines, samplers, and digital audio workstations.
So technology has played a massive role in shaping the sound of rock,
It has.
from its rawest forms to its most experimental.
Without a doubt. And that's one of the things that keeps rock music so dynamic and constantly changing.
But it's not just about technology, is it? The way musicians write and perform rock music has evolved too.
Absolutely. In the early days of rock and roll, the focus was on simpler song structures, catchy melodies, and high-energy performances.
Think about Chuck Berry's iconic guitar riffs and Elvis Presley's stage presence.
Exactly. But as rock music evolved, so did the songwriting and performance styles.
Okay.
You start to see more complex song structures, more experimental arrangements,
Right.
and even more introspective lyrics.
Like the long multi-part suites in progressive rock, for example.
Precisely. And then you have the raw power and aggression of punk rock,
Mm.
the theatrical flair of glam rock,
Yeah.
and the introspective angst of grunge.
It's amazing to think about all the different directions rock music has taken over the years.
It's a true testament to the creativity and ingenuity of the artists who have shaped the genre.
And speaking of artists, I'm curious, who are some of the key figures who really pushed the boundaries of rock music?
We've already touched on some of the pioneers like Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, and the Beatles.
Right.
But there are so many others who have made incredibly important contributions to the evolution of rock.
Like who? Give me some examples.
Well, in the 60s, you have Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
who revolutionized guitar playing with his innovative techniques and psychedelic sounds.
He was a true innovator.
Absolutely. Then in the 70s, you have David Bowie,
Yeah.
who challenged gender norms and embraced theatricality in both his music and performances.
A true iconoclast.
He was.
Wow.
And then in the 80s, you have Prince,
Yeah.
who blended rock, funk, pop, and soul into his own unique and hugely influential style.
He was a musical genius.
No doubt about it. And those are just a few examples. There are countless other artists
Yeah.
who have pushed the boundaries of rock,
Mm-hmm.
experimenting with new sounds,
Yeah.
challenging conventions,
Right.
and inspiring generations.
It's like a never-ending story of innovation and creativity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's what makes rock music so exciting and enduring.
It's a genre that's constantly evolving, always surprising us,
Yeah.
and constantly reminding us of the power of music to change the world.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Right.
We're not just looking at the history of rock music.
Right.
We're looking at the history of cultural and social change.
It's like a sonic time capsule filled with the hopes, dreams, and anxieties of past generations.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it reminds us that music can be a powerful force for good, for change, and for connecting us all.
Okay, I'm officially hooked on this rock and roll journey.
Me too.
Eh.
It's an incredible story, and we're
Yeah.
just getting started.
What else can we uncover?
Well, we've talked about the impact of rock music on culture and society. Its evolution as a musical form,
Yeah.
and some of the key figures who have shaped the genre.
Right.
But what about the future of rock music?
Oh, yeah.
Where is it headed?
Okay.
What are the challenges and opportunities facing rock musicians in the 21st century?
Okay, those are big questions.
Right.
But I'm gaming him. Let's dive into the future of rock and roll.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's explore what lies ahead for this iconic genre.
So the music industry has been through a lot of changes in recent years,
Yeah.
especially with the rise of streaming services
Right.
and the decline of physical album sales.
Oh, yeah.
How has this new landscape impacted rock music?
It's definitely presented challenges for rock musicians,
Okay.
especially for newcomers trying to break into the scene.
How so?
Well, in the past, rock bands could build a following by touring and selling albums.
But that's become more difficult in the digital age.
Exactly.
Okay.
Streaming services have made it easier than ever to discover new music,
Right.
but it's also made it incredibly hard for artists to stand out from the crowd.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is. And it's forced rock musicians to find new ways to connect with fans and build a following.
Like using social media, for instance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Social media has become absolutely essential for rock musicians.
Yeah.
They use it to promote their music, interact with fans, and build a community.
It's like the modern-day equivalent of touring and handing out flyers, right?
In a way, it is,
Yeah.
but it also comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, it can be tough to cut through all the noise on social media and get your music heard by the right people.
And managing social media effectively takes a lot of time and effort.
It does.
Right.
And it can be a major distraction from the actual music-making process.
So it's a balancing act for rock musicians.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They need to be smart about using social media to their advantage,
Right.
but they also need to stay focused on what matters most, creating great music.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So besides the challenges of the digital age,
Right.
what other factors are shaping the future of rock music?
One major factor is the ever-changing tastes of music listeners.
Okay, how are tastes evolving?
In recent years, we've seen a growing interest in genres like hip-hop, electronic music, and pop.
Those genres have definitely been dominating the charts lately.
They have. And it's led some to wonder if rock music is becoming less relevant.
Is rock music fading into obscurity?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Rock music has always had its peaks and valleys in terms of popularity.
It's cyclical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a phase where other genres are simply in the spotlight.
But that doesn't mean rock is dead.
Not at all. There are still so many talented rock musicians out there
Okay.
making incredible music and pushing the genre forward.
So rock music is still alive and well.
It is, and I believe it will continue to evolve and adapt, finding new ways to connect with listeners and stay relevant in this constantly changing musical landscape.
So what does the future hold for rock music?
It's hard to say for certain, but I think we can anticipate more experimentation and genre bending.
Rock musicians will keep pushing boundaries.
They will. They'll incorporate elements from other genres,
Yeah.
experiment with new technologies,
Okay.
and find innovative ways to express themselves musically.
So the future of rock music is all about innovation and evolution.
Exactly. Rock music has always been about pushing boundaries and challenging conventions.
And that's what will keep it vibrant and exciting for years to come.
I agree.
All right. I'm really curious now.
Okay.
What are some of the most exciting trends in rock music right now?
Sure.
What are the up-and-coming artists and sounds that are shaping the future of the genre?
Well, one trend that I'm personally excited about is the resurgence of garage rock.
Garage rock. You mean like back to basics rock and roll?
Exactly. It's all about raw energy,
Okay.
simple song structures, and that DIY aesthetic.
So it's a reaction against the overproduced, polished sound of a lot of mainstream music.
It is. And it's a breath of fresh air.
What bands are leading this garage rock revival?
Oh, there are so many great bands out there.
Yeah.
But some of my favorites include Ty Segall, Theos,
Yeah.
and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Those are some pretty interesting band names.
They are. And their music is even more interesting.
Wow.
They're all incredibly creative and prolific, releasing album after album of raw, psychedelic,
Okay.
and just plain fun rock and roll.
Sounds like they're channeling that primal energy of early rock and roll.
They absolutely are, and it's incredibly exciting to see.
So garage rock is definitely a trend to watch.
It is.
What else is happening in the world of rock?
Another fascinating development is the rise of what some people are calling art rock.
Art rock. What's that all about?
It's a bit difficult to define because it encompasses a wide range of styles and influences.
But what are some common threads?
Well, art rock bands tend to be more experimental and unconventional in their approach to songwriting and instrumentation.
So they're pushing the boundaries of what rock music can be.
Precisely. They're not afraid to incorporate elements of jazz,
Okay.
classical music,
Mm-hmm.
electronic music,
Yeah.
and even avant-garde influences.
So it's a very eclectic and forward-thinking genre.
It is. And it's producing some truly groundbreaking music.
Okay, you've got me intrigued.
Right.
Who are some of the leading figures in this art rock movement?
Well, some bands that are often cited as examples of art rock include Radiohead,
Oh, okay.
Arcade Fire,
Yeah.
and Sufjan Stevens.
Those are some pretty big names.
They are. And they've all had a huge impact on the sound of contemporary rock music.
So art rock is another trend to watch.
It is.
But what about the heavier side of rock music?
Right.
Is metal still a thing?
Oh, absolutely. Metal is alive and well.
Okay.
And it's constantly evolving, with new subgenres and styles popping up all the time.
So what's happening in the world of metal these days?
One trend gaining momentum is what's called progressive metal.
Progressive metal. What's that like?
As the name suggests, it blends elements of progressive rock and heavy metal.
So we're talking complex song structures.
Yeah,
Virtuosic musicianship,
Hmm.
and a heavy, distorted sound.
exactly. It's a challenging and rewarding genre, both for musicians and listeners.
What bands are pushing the boundaries of progressive metal?
Some of the most acclaimed progressive metal bands include Dream Theater,
Okay.
Tool,
Yeah.
and Mastodon.
Those are legendary names in the metal world.
They are. And they continue to inspire a new generation of metal musicians.
So progressive metal is definitely one to keep an eye on in the metal scene.
Right.
What else is happening?
Another intriguing development is the emergence of what's called black gaze.
Black gaze. That sounds intense.
It is.
Right.
It's a fusion of black metal and shoegaze.
Okay, I'm not familiar with those subgenres.
Okay.
Can you break those down for me?
Sure. Black metal is a subgenre of heavy metal known for its fast tempos,
Mm-hmm.
shrieking vocals,
Okay.
and dark atmospheric sound.
Sounds pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah.
And shoegaze is a subgenre of alternative rock known for its dreamy, atmospheric sound,
Okay.
often created with layers of distorted guitars and effects pedals.
So black gaze combines the intensity of black metal with the dreamy quality of shoegaze.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates a very unique and evocative sound.
Who are some of the bands pioneering this black gaze sound?
Some of the most prominent black gaze bands include Deaf Heaven,
Okay.
Alcest,
Mm-hmm.
and Wolves in the Throne Room.
Wow, those are some atmospheric names.
They are.
Yeah.
And their music is even more atmospheric. It's a genre that's truly pushing the boundaries of what metal can be.
Yeah. So black gaze is another trend to watch in the metal scene.
It is.
It sounds like metal is as diverse and innovative as ever.
It is. And that's what makes it such a vital and exciting genre.
We've covered a lot of ground garage rock,
Yeah.
art rock,
Right.
progressive metal, black gaze.
Yeah.
It seems like the future of rock music is incredibly bright and diverse.
It does. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about rock music.
Right.
It's constantly evolving,
Yeah.
always surprising us,
Mhm.
and always finding new ways to connect with listeners.
It's a genre full of life, energy, and possibility.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see what the future holds.
This has been an amazing journey through the history and future of rock and roll.
It really has.
We've explored so much,
We have.
from the pioneers of rock and roll to the up-and-coming artists who are shaping the sound of the genre today.
Right.
And we've delved into the many ways rock music has impacted culture, society,
Yeah.
and even politics.
It's been a fascinating deep dive into one of the most influential and enduring genres of all time.
I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for rock and roll.
Me too.
It's a genre that's full of passion, creativity, and the power to change the world.
And I think we've only scratched the surface.
Right.
There's so much more to explore and discover.
This deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
I'm feeling inspired and energized.
Me too. It's a reminder that music has the power to connect us, move us, and inspire us.
And the spirit of rock and roll will live on for generations to come.
I have no doubt about that.
You know, it's interesting. We've been talking about rock and roll as this driving force of change.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, it also reflects the changes happening around it.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mirror reflecting the social, political,
Right.
and technological shifts of each era.
Exactly. Like, you can almost hear the anxieties of the Cold War
Yeah.
in the psychedelic sounds of the 60s.
Right.
Or the DIY spirit of punk in the stripped-down aesthetic of the 70s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the way rock has fused with other genres,
Right.
like hip-hop or electronic music,
Yeah.
shows how it's constantly absorbing and adapting to the cultural landscape around it.
It's like rock and roll is this living, breathing organism that evolves alongside society.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah.
It's not static.
Yeah.
It's constantly in flux, responding to the world around it.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to study.
It is.
It's not just about the music itself.
Right.
It's about understanding the cultural and historical context that shaped it.
Precisely. It's a window into the past, but also a glimpse into the future.
Speaking of the future,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier that rock and roll faces challenges in the digital age.
Right.
What are some of the ways rock musicians are adapting and innovating to stay relevant?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the sheer volume of music available online.
Yeah.
It's harder than ever for artists to stand out from the crowd.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Exactly. So rock musicians have to get creative with how they promote their music and connect with fans.
So what are they doing?
Many are embracing social media platforms
Okay.
like TikTok and Instagram to share their music, connect with fans,
Yeah.
and build a following.
It's like the modern equivalent of playing gigs in small clubs to build a grassroots following.
In a way, it is. They're using these platforms to build a fan base one fan at a time.
And it seems to be working. Some artists have gone viral on TikTok and gained millions of followers overnight.
That's right. Social media has become an incredibly powerful tool for rock musicians to break through the noise and reach a wider audience.
But it's not just about promotion, right? Rock musicians are also experimenting with new sounds and technologies to create truly innovative music.
Absolutely. They're blending rock with other genres,
Yeah.
incorporating electronic elements,
Okay.
and pushing the limits of what's possible in the studio.
Like they're constantly pushing the envelope, trying to create something new and exciting.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about rock and roll.
Right.
It's a genre that's constantly evolving, always looking for the next big thing.
So even though the music industry is always changing,
Right.
rock and roll is finding ways to adapt and thrive.
It is. And I think it will continue to do so as long as there are passionate musicians out there
Yeah.
who are willing to push boundaries and create something new.
It's incredible how resilient rock and roll is.
It is.
No matter the changes, it always finds a way to adapt.
It really speaks to its core spirit. That drive to innovate and evolve, it's not about clinging to the past.
Right.
It's about carrying that energy forward into new sounds and expressions.
Exactly. And that makes me think,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive
Oh, that's a great question.
into the world of rock and roll?
I think the biggest takeaway is that rock and roll is more than just music.
Okay.
It's a cultural force, an attitude,
Yeah.
a reflection of who we are as a society. It's about passion,
Right.
rebellion, and that undeniable power of music to change the world.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Could any other genre have ignited such a cultural and political revolution?
Wow. Yeah.
And what will today's music inspire in the decades to come? Something to ponder. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive. Go crank up some rock and feel the revolution.